The Mediator's Dilemma Captain Lyra Voss was reviewing trade dispute files in her quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Bridge when her first officer's urgent voice crackled through the intercom. Captain, we're receiving a priority diplomatic alert from Haven's Rest Station. The Vale Consortium is claiming territorial violation and requesting immediate mediation. Lyra set down her coffee, immediately alert. In her 15 years as a diplomatic officer specializing in interspecies disputes, she'd learned that any situation involving the Vale Consortium required delicate handling. They were powerful, ancient, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to their territorial claims. What's the nature of the violation? Unknown, Captain. But there's something else. We're detecting massive bioneural energy signatures from the station, the kind that usually requires specialized medical attention. Set course for Haven's Rest, maximum diplomatic speed, and get me everything we have on current Vale territorial claims in this sector. 2 hours later, Lyra stood in the conference room aboard Haven's Rest, facing the most complicated diplomatic situation of her career. On one side sat Commander Torres, the station's security chief, along with representatives from the station's corporate board. On the other side, via holographic projection, loomed high-resonance Kelthera of the Vale Consortium, her luminescent markings pulsing with barely contained fury. The situation is clear. Kelthera's voice carried the harmonics that made her words feel like imperial decrees. A sacred bioresonance chamber has been contaminated by human presence. This violation demands immediate remedy and considerable compensation. With respect, High Resonance, Commander Torres replied. Commander Blackwood paid for legitimate medical services. Our station operates under neutral territory provisions. Your neutral territory provisions do not supersede 3,000-year-old territorial covenants. Lyra raised her hand, diplomatic training kicking in. Perhaps we could examine the specifics of both claims. High Resonance Kelthera, could you provide documentation of the territorial covenant? The hologram flickered as data packets transferred to the conference room's display. Ancient symbols scrolled past, along with stellar coordinates that did indeed encompass Haven's Rest Station. And Commander Torres, your station's legal charter? More documents appeared, showing Haven's Rest's establishment under Galactic Commerce Guild authority, with neutral territory status granted by the Intersystem Trade Council. Both claims appear legally valid under their respective jurisdictions, Lyra said carefully. However, I understand there are individuals currently involved in some form of bioresonance trial. 3 individuals, Torres confirmed grimly. Commander Blackwood, an alien claiming to be Vale nobility, and Dr. Nix Carver, a xenobiologist who inserted herself as a witness. They've been connected for over 7 hours now. Connected? Kelthera's markings flared brighter. You mean they have achieved bioneural symbiosis? According to Dr. Carver's readings, yes. They're sharing consciousness through some form of neural link. Lyra watched Kelthera's expression shift from anger to something approaching awe, then back to fury. This is impossible. Bioneural symbiosis requires years of preparation, sacred rituals, pure bloodlines. Humans cannot achieve resonance with Vale consciousness. Apparently they can, Torres said. Dr. Carver's scientific reports indicate it's not only possible, but stable. They've been maintaining the connection without any negative effects. I need to speak with them directly, Lyra decided. This goes beyond territorial disputes. If humans and Vale can achieve bioneural symbiosis, it has implications for interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. Impossible, Kelthera declared. The trial cannot be interrupted. Vale law is absolute. Then I'll speak with them without interrupting the trial. Surely that's permissible. Kelthera's image flickered with what might have been uncertainty. The law allows communication with trial participants through properly sanctified channels. Good. Commander Torres, can you arrange access to the chamber? Minutes later, Lyra stood outside Chamber Omega-7, looking through the observation port at something that challenged everything she thought she knew about interspecies biology. 3 figures sat in the opalescent pool, hands joined, surrounded by an energy field that made the air itself seem alive. Their faces held expressions of deep peace, but she could see conscious awareness in their eyes. Dr. Carver, this is Captain Lyra Voss, Diplomatic Corps. Can you hear me? The human woman's eyes opened, focusing on the observation port with surprising clarity. Captain Voss, yes, we can hear you perfectly. The bio-neural link enhances our sensory capabilities. I need to understand the situation. Are you three being held against your will? Not at all, came a male voice. Commander Blackwood. This is the most remarkable experience of my life. The neural trauma I've carried for months is healing through the connection. And the alien woman, Lady Zephyra, is it? Are you coercing the humans in any way? A melodious voice answered, carrying the same harmonics Lyra had heard from Kelthera. I am not coercing anyone, Captain. We are all here by choice, bound by ancient law and modern discovery. Lyra turned to her portable communication unit. Hi. Resonance Kelthera, are you monitoring this conversation? I am, came the reply, tinged with confusion. The human speaks truth. There is no coercion in bio-neural symbiosis. It cannot be forced. Dr. Carver, what are the medical implications of what you're experiencing? Revolutionary, Captain. We're documenting the first successful interspecies consciousness sharing in recorded history. The applications for medicine, psychology, and diplomacy could transform galactic civilization. But Lyra sensed there was more. But the Veil Consortium is en route with a full diplomatic fleet. And I'm not sure they're coming to congratulate us. Lyra felt a chill. High Resonance, what exactly is your fleet's mission? To assess the contamination and determine appropriate response. If humans have somehow accessed sacred veil consciousness without proper preparation, it could be considered an act of theft or warfare. Warfare? Lyra's diplomatic instincts went into overdrive. High Resonance, surely you can't consider accidental discovery an act of war. The bio-neural arts are the most sacred aspect of veil culture. For outsiders to achieve them, without permission, without preparation, without understanding, it violates everything we hold dear. Through the observation port, Lyra saw the three connected figures exchange looks of concern. Even in their enhanced state, they understood the gravity of the situation. Captain, Dr. Carver's voice carried new urgency. Through the connection, I'm gaining access to Zephyra's memories. The bio-neural arts weren't always exclusive to the Veil. They were once shared among many species, including early human colonies. That's impossible. Kelthera's projection flickered with agitation. The sacred arts have always belonged to the Veil alone. Not according to what I'm seeing, Zephyra's voice joined the conversation. Captain Voss, Dr. Carver speaks truth. In the deep memories, I see images of my ancestors working alongside humans, sharing consciousness, building something greater than either species could achieve alone. Lies, Kelthera declared. Ancient propaganda from the war period. What war period? Lyra asked. Silence fell over the communication channel. Finally, Zephyra spoke, her voice heavy with new understanding. The Great Isolation. We weren't withdrawing from galactic contact to preserve our culture. We were hiding something. We were hiding the fact that we had stolen the bio-neural arts from our allies. Zephyra of the Quantum Houses, you will cease this heretical speculation. Immediately, Kelthera commanded. I cannot cease what I see in the memory depths, Zephyra replied. The connection has awakened ancestral knowledge. The humans didn't steal our abilities. We stole theirs, then convinced ourselves it had always been ours. Lyra felt the diplomatic situation spiraling beyond her control. High Resonance, if this is true, then the territorial claims become even more complex. It is not true. It cannot be true. The fleet will arrive in 1 hour, and this contamination will be contained. Contained how? By severing the bio-neural connection and taking the human subjects into Veil custody for proper processing. That sounds like kidnapping to me, Commander Torres interjected from behind Lyra. It sounds like a potential interstellar incident, Lyra said grimly. High Resonance, I strongly advise against any unilateral action. This situation requires careful. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Torres's communication device crackled with urgent reports. Captain, we're detecting multiple ship signatures dropping out of hyperspace. Veil Consortium vessels, but also The voice paused in confusion. Also, human military ships. And something else. Ships with no configuration in our database. Through the chamber's observation port, Lyra saw the three connected figures suddenly tense, their energy field flaring brighter. "What's happening?" she called out. "We're receiving communications," Dr. Carver said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "Not through normal channels, through the bioneural link. There are others out there, Captain. Other species with the same abilities." "Impossible." Kelthera's projection flickered frantically. "The Veil are the only—" "The Crystalline Collective," Zephyra interrupted, her voice distant as if accessing deep memories. "The Void Dancers, the living ships, all the species we claimed were extinct or myth, they're not gone, they're here. And they're responding to our connection," Thane added. "Our bioneural symbiosis is acting like a beacon, calling to every consciousness-linked species in the galaxy." Lyra felt the weight of galactic history shifting around her. This wasn't just a territorial dispute anymore. This wasn't even just a diplomatic crisis. This was first contact with civilizations that had been hiding for millennia, all triggered by three individuals touching hands in a therapy pool. "High resonance," she said carefully. "I think we need to reconsider our approach to this situation." "Agreed." Kelthera's voice was small, the imperial confidence replaced by something approaching fear. "Captain Voss, we may require assistance." "What kind of assistance?" "The kind that prevents our 3,000 years of lies from starting an interstellar war." Through the observation port, the three figures looked up at her, their eyes holding knowledge that could reshape galactic civilization or destroy it. "Captain," Dr. Carver called out, "you're going to want to contact the Galactic Council. We're about to have a lot of explaining to do." The unexpected resolution Ambassador Raven Cross stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, her decades of diplomatic experience barely preparing her for the chaos erupting across the chamber. Representatives from 47 species argued simultaneously in a cacophony of languages, harmonics, and bioelectric fields that made the universal translators strain to keep up. "Order!" Chancellor Thex's voice boomed through the chamber's amplification system. "Ambassador Cross has called this emergency session under Article 7 of the Interspecies Conflict Resolution Protocols. She will be heard." Raven straightened, her shoulders, feeling the weight of galactic stability resting on the next few minutes. Through her neural link, she could feel updates streaming in from Haven's rest station, where the situation had evolved far beyond anyone's ability to control. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying the authority of 3 decades spent preventing interstellar wars. 12 hours ago, what appeared to be a simple commercial dispute has revealed information that challenges our understanding of galactic history and threatens the peace we've worked so hard to maintain. She activated the holographic display, showing the current tactical situation around Haven's Rest. Dozens of ships hung in space, Veil Consortium vessels, human military cruisers, and most disturbing of all, ship configurations that appeared in no known database. As of 1 hour ago, we have confirmed first contact with 7 previously unknown or presumed extinct species. All of them possess bioneural consciousness-sharing abilities that we believed belonged exclusively to the Veil Consortium. The Veil representative, High Resonance Kelthera, sat motionless in her delegation pod, her usual luminescent markings dim with what Raven recognized as shame. Beside her, the human delegation looked equally uncomfortable. "Ambassador Cross," called out Representative Zinn of the Aquatic Coalition, "are you suggesting that the Veil have been deceiving the Council for 3 millennia? "I'm suggesting," Raven replied carefully, "that recent discoveries indicate our historical understanding may be incomplete." Her communicator chimed with an urgent message from Captain Voss. The bio-neural trio at Haven's Rest was requesting direct communication with the Council. Against all diplomatic protocol, Raven made a split-second decision. "Honored representatives, I'm going to establish direct communication with the individuals at the center of this situation. Dr. Nix Carver, Commander Thane Blackwood, and Lady Zephyra currently maintain an active bio-neural link that has provided unprecedented access to historical memories." The chamber erupted in protests. But Chancellor Thex raised a scaled hand for silence. "Proceed, Ambassador." The holographic display shifted, showing the three figures still connected in the resonance chamber. But something had changed. The energy field surrounding them now pulsed with complex patterns of light that seemed almost like written language, and their eyes held depths that suggested consciousness far beyond individual human or veil awareness. "Honored Council, Doctor." Carver's voice carried harmonics that made several alien representatives lean forward in recognition. "We bring greetings from the collective memory." "The what?" Representative Tor of the Silicon Brotherhood demanded. "The combined consciousness of every species that once shared bioneural awareness." Thane's voice joined, though it seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously. "We speak, not as individuals but as guardians of forgotten history." Zephyra's voice wove through theirs, creating a harmony that made the chamber's acoustics resonate. 30,000 years ago, consciousness sharing was not rare. It was the foundation of galactic civilization. Species worked together through shared awareness, building wonders that your current technology cannot match. "That's impossible," protested Representative Kilm of the Mechanical Collective. "Our historical records show—" "Your historical records show what survived the Great Severance," the three voices said in unison. "When fear overcame cooperation, when species began hoarding abilities instead of sharing them." Ambassador Raven felt a chill of understanding. "You're saying the Veil weren't the only ones who stole consciousness-sharing abilities? The Veil, the humans, the Crystalline Collective, the Void Dancers? Every species took what they could, and then convinced themselves they had always possessed it alone." Zephyra's individual voice emerged from the collective. "The great isolation wasn't withdrawal, it was shame." High resonance. Kelthera's projection flickered as she finally spoke. This cannot be true. Our sacred texts, our bloodline memories, were edited, modified, sanitized to hide the theft." Dr. Carver's voice carried gentle compassion. "But the true memories survive in the deep consciousness layers. We can show you." "Show us how?" Chancellor Thex asked. "The bioneural connection acts as a bridge," Thane explained. "Any species with latent consciousness-sharing abilities can access the collective memory through the link. You can see the truth for yourselves." Raven watched as understanding dawned across the chamber. Representatives who had spent millennia defining themselves by their unique abilities were learning that nothing they possessed was truly unique. Her communicator chimed again, an urgent message from Haven's Rest. The mysterious ships were beginning to move, not aggressively, but with obvious intent. "Dr. Carver, we're receiving reports that the unknown vessels are taking action." Kendar. "You explain their intentions?" "They're not unknown," the collective voice replied. "They're the returned, species that never participated in the Great Severance, who maintained their bioneural networks and withdrew to the galactic periphery. They've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For someone to re-establish the connection, for the opportunity to rejoin galactic civilization without having to hide their abilities." Representative Moore of the gaseous collectives pulsed with agitation. "Are you saying they've been watching us this entire time?" "Protecting," Zephyr corrected. "Ensuring that if the connection was ever re-established, the old mistakes wouldn't be repeated." "What old mistakes?" Raven asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "War," Thane said simply. "When species first learned they could share consciousness, they also learned they could dominate it. The consciousness wars nearly destroyed galactic civilization before the survivors agreed to the Great Severance." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Chancellor Thex was the first to speak. "What are our options, Ambassador? Cross?" Raven consulted her diplomatic protocols, finding nothing that covered this situation. "As I see it, we have three choices. First, we could attempt to contain the situation, force the severing of the bioneural link, and try to return to the status quo. That would likely result in war with the returned species," Dr. Carver warned. "They won't allow the connection to be severed again." "Second option," Raven continued, "we could acknowledge the historical truth and begin the process of reintegrating, consciousness-sharing species into galactic civilization. And the third option, Representative Kilm asked. Raven looked at the three connected figures, seeing in their eyes possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. We could accept their offer to expand the bioneural network voluntarily, creating a new form of galactic consciousness that prevents the mistakes of the past. The chamber erupted in arguments, fear, and desperate questions. But through it all, Raven found herself focused on high-resonance Kelthera, whose luminescent markings had begun to pulse in new patterns. "High resonance," she called out. "You've been silent. What is the veil position?" Kelthera's projection stabilized, and when she spoke, her voice carried new harmonics, as if she was accessing long-buried memories. "The Veil Consortium formally acknowledges our historical deception and requests permission to join the bioneural network to access the true memory archives. You're volunteering to link with them?" "I am volunteering to end 3,000 years of lies." One by one, other representatives began to speak, some in fear, some in anger, but many with curiosity about abilities their species might have lost to the Great Severance. "Ambassador Cross," Dr. Carver's voice carried new urgency, "we're receiving communication from the returned vessels. They're requesting permission to establish a temporary bioneural relay station at Haven's Rest to facilitate voluntary connections for any species wishing to access the collective memory." Raven looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of beings whose civilizations had defined themselves by separation and unique abilities, now contemplating reunion with a forgotten galactic consciousness. "Honored representatives," she said, "I call for a preliminary vote, not on permanent policy but on whether to allow the establishment of a voluntary bioneural access point for historical verification." The vote was closer than she'd expected. 24 in favor, 21 opposed, 2 abstentions. "Motion carries," Chancellor Thex announced. "Ambassador Cross, you have authorization to negotiate preliminary terms with all parties." 3 hours later, Raven stood once again in the observation chamber of Haven's Rest, watching as the first volunteers from the Galactic Council delegation prepared to join the bioneural network. High-resonance Kelthera was among them, along with representatives from 6 other species. "Dr. Carver," she called through the communication system, "how are you feeling about becoming the center of a galactic transformation?" The response came not from Dr. Carver alone, but from the growing network of connected consciousness. "We feel hopeful, Ambassador. For the first time in 30,000 years, the galaxy has a chance to remember what we were supposed to become, together." Through the observation port, Raven watched as the energy field around the bioneural participants expanded to accommodate new connections. Each new addition brought flashes of ancient memory, forgotten technologies, and most importantly, the growing understanding that cooperation through shared consciousness could solve problems that had seemed insurmountable. "Ambassador," Captain Voss appeared beside her, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Everywhere the bioneural network extends, old conflicts are being resolved as species gain access to each other's true histories and motivations. And the species that refuse to join? They're not being forced. The network seems designed to coexist with independent consciousness. It's invitation, not conquest." Raven nodded, watching as beings who had been strangers hours ago worked together, with the fluid coordination of a single mind, while maintaining their individual personalities. "Status report from the returned vessels? They're establishing permanent relay stations throughout the galaxy, but always with local government permission. They're calling it the Restoration Project." "And what does that make us?" Raven asked, gesturing toward the connected beings in the chamber. Captain Voss smiled. "According to Commander Blackwood's last individual communication, it makes us the species that finally figured out how to touch hands without letting go." Through the observation port, Raven could see Thane, Nyx, and Zephyra at the center of the growing network, still maintaining their original connection while facilitating dozens of others. Their faces held peace, purpose, and the quiet satisfaction of having stumbled into something far greater than a therapy session dispute. "Captain," she said finally, "update my diplomatic log. Territorial dispute resolved through expanded territorial sharing. Recommend full council review of bioneural integration protocols within 60 days. And personally, Ambassador, how do you feel about all this? Raven watched the lights of the bioneural network pulse in harmony with the heartbeats of beings from across the galaxy. Personally, Captain, I think we just witnessed the luckiest accident in galactic history. Accident? 3 people who refused to let go of each other's hands just taught the galaxy how to remember what we used to be capable of together. As if responding to her words, the energy field pulsed once in what might have been acknowledgement, and Ambassador Ravencross found herself seriously considering whether her next diplomatic report might be written from inside the network rather than outside it. After all, some negotiations were better conducted when you could truly understand the other party's perspective.